Hi, my name is Tammy,
And I'm Jen.
and they call us Woo. Hi, everybody. Today we are going to talk about Astral Projection.
Woohoo!
Another super awesome woo crazy thing to talk about. Well, it's not crazy. Some people might think it is, but for the most part, the people who are listening to us, I don't think any of the things we talk about are crazy. So, um, interestingly enough, it's kind of a trend right now with younger people. My daughter, when she was in high school, which she's freshly out of high school, I remember her talking about trying astral projection and like other kids in school talking about it and stuff like that. And I was like, what? That's what you
I think
guys
that's
talk
so
about now?
funny.
Like, that's interesting. I mean, anyway, so yeah, when we were kind of discussing what we wanted to talk to everybody about today, you mentioned that, and I thought that was a really fun way to start, especially because this all blends into like spooky season, and you even thought about it just because you were watching a movie that was
Yes.
a little too close to reality.
Yes. Like so many of the creepy movies are, and people do not
Yes.
realize that if you're in the woo-woo realm, you know that it's freaking true.
It's always possible.
Yes. Yes. People are like, oh, there's a creepy kid by your bed. Oh, that doesn't happen. Yes, it does, people.
Remember the black eyed children.
Yes, yes. Come live a day in my life, and you will know that all of the
Oh,
horror movies are true.
everyone's gonna be freaked out now when they watch these movies. Like, wait a minute, it was
Sorry.
easier when we could think it wasn't true. But
Yeah,
there probably is a seed of truth in most of the things that we see. It just because
there
it
is. I
came.
mean, I think they go way over the top with some of the
Oh,
scary movies,
yeah.
but there is truth in a lot of the creepy movies that are out there now.
So tell me about what you saw and
Yes.
about astral projection and how that plays into each other.
Yes. So, I am going to make note there's a spoiler alert in here for the movie Insidious. So
Mm.
if you have not seen that and you want to see that, you might want to be like la 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 until you've seen that movie. If you have seen that and you're fine with it, or you don't want to see it and you're fine with a spoiler alert, keep listening. But either way, come back afterwards
We'll
after
let you
you've
know in
watched
the
it and listened.
comments what part you have to skip if you don't want a spoiler. How's
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Pretty much the whole time I talk about the movie. So in this movie, the premise is this little boy ends up in a comatose state, and the doctors can't figure it out. They're like, this isn't a coma, we don't know what this is. And it turns out they bring a psychic in, and it turns out that he's been astral projecting, having out of body experiences at night while he's sleeping. Like he's very active while he's sleeping. His soul is leaving his body and going and exploring all of these other places, all of these other realms. And he thinks he's just dreaming because he's a kid and nobody has taught him about astral projection because we don't do that in this world for some reason, unless you live
Well,
in my
obviously,
house.
there's an interest if
Yes, which
teenagers
I
are
love.
talking about
I
it. Yeah.
love that so much. But so this kid is astral projecting, doesn't realize that it's a thing. He thinks he's just dreaming, and he goes too far. And his soul gets lost in this really, really dark place.
Mm.
And so our soul is tethered to our body. There is like an energetic cord that is attaching us to our soul. So when our soul goes out of our body, when we have an out of body experience, there's still like this little string that is keeping us
Mm.
attached so that our soul can follow that back
I
and come back
picture
into our
like
body.
movies where people go exploring and they're attached to a rope. So you
Yes,
can pull them back if necessary.
exactly like that. So in the movie, he gets so far out that his body can't find, or his soul can't find its way back to his body.
Mm.
And the longer that his soul is out of his body, and the longer that his body is in this comatose state, he gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And all of those beings who would like to be in a body
Oh.
start trying to get into his body. And so, like, they're having all these haunting experiences in the house, and all of these really dark things are happening because these nefarious beings are trying to get into his body so they can either harm other people or so they can experience life again or whatever their motive is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the premise of the movie. That was actually a lot of the movie. So sorry. Again, spoiler alert.
I mean, I feel like
Um,
most horror movies, spoilers aren't that big of a deal.
yeah, yeah. You don't know how it ends. I won't tell you that part. But so in the movie, they're talking about that whole concept of if you get too far out of your body as a soul and you can't find your way back, that opens your physical body. Your physical vessel is now empty,
Mm.
and something else can come in and fill it,
Mm-hmm.
which I know we've talked about with like walk-ins and people who have addiction and their soul steps out. Something else can step in. Same thing when you're doing astral projection. So it it made me think about it because we're sitting there and my fiance is like, this isn't a very scary movie. And I'm like, until you realize that that's what really happens. Like, that is what happens if you don't know what you're doing. Um, so it just brought up the fact that most people don't recognize that that happens. Most people don't recognize out of body experiences. Most people don't even know that they're astral projecting at night. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, weird side note. Can cats astral project? Because my husband had his second experience with our cat being having like full on interactions, like very lifelike interactions with him in his dream.
Hmm.
I do, hopefully without embarrassing him, which it should be fine because nobody knows who he is. But um, he did have. Okay, so everybody's had that dream before where they like are on the toilet, like actually going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can lead people to actually going to the bathroom in bed. Like that has
Yes.
happened to many people before. So
Yes.
I don't think that is an unusual thing.
No.
But my, my husband said he had a very vivid dream. This was a long time ago. He had a very vivid dream that he had to go to the bathroom really bad. He was trying to go. He couldn't go. He couldn't go. And my cat came in and was like, "Don't do it. You're in bed." And he woke up. He woke up and opened the door to go to the bathroom because he was like, "Oh my god, I am in bed." And the cat was sitting on the bathroom sink staring at him. And I was like, "Dude, did he beam into your mind and like save you?" That's like the craziest thing ever. I don't
I've
know. We talked about
never
cats being like, able to go back and forth. Maybe they can project themselves too, where they're like, this person needs some assistance.
I'm sure they can. I guess I've never thought about cats astral projecting. I know that when they've crossed over, they'll step into our dreams or step into our
Well,
reality.
this is a very
So,
living cat that seems to have
well,
interactions with him in his sleep.
yeah. Well, that wouldn't surprise me either.
It's such a good story, though. Don't do it.
Oh.
You're in
Did
bed.
did your cat actually like talk to him, or
Yes.
was it just like a
Yes.
I'm
He
gonna paw
said,
you in the
no, he
face
said,
and
he actually said, don't do it. You're in bed.
now I want to know what his voice was like. Was it like a very proper English
I
accent,
should
or
ask.
was it like a
I can't
Brooklyn
remember what he
accent?
said.
Like,
I know. I need to find out. I can't remember what he said. I just remember laughing so hard I was crying. So I don't think I remembered to ask that. Anyway,
that of course those are the
back to the
questions that I
actual
ask.
like astral projection. Just thoughts
Yeah.
that pop into my head.
Well, so okay, so let me ask you this. Have you ever had an out of body experience?
I I probably have had more that I don't know if I could always identify, but I have more recently had experiences that felt very like I could remember them, and it felt like I knew more about what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I know I shared this with you, but I lost a very close friend not that long ago, and was really experiencing some deep grief about that. And I had a really interesting experience. There's a group of women that I get together with sometimes that we just do all types of fun woo stuff. We meditate together, or do burning ceremonies, or learn things. We've made drums together. We do all types of fun stuff. And this is just like a really, just a positive, energetic, like loving group of women. So it's always a lot of fun to get together. So anyway, not too long after this happened with my friend, I decided to go to this thing we had planned, going to one of their houses, doing some meditation and stuff. And when we were in meditation, and I do honestly believe the power of the group of women had a lot to do with this too.
Yeah.
But while I was in meditation, I was sitting up. I could hear what was happening, but I got this experience of um, this really like bright white light that started at my periphery and slowly like came around and encompassed me. And this really, it was bright, vibrant, and it felt really peaceful and really beautiful. But I remember feeling like I was floating,
Yeah.
and it didn't last super long. Well, I don't know. It didn't feel like it lasted super long. But I remember when I came back down, I had to like tap my feet on the ground because I was like, am I here? Am I in the
Hmm.
world right now? Because I could
Yeah.
tell I wasn't, like, my body was just not fully connected right then. And it was
Yeah.
beautiful because honestly, it was a very healing thing for me too, that
Yeah.
helped me feel back in my body after feeling very shattered. Um, and it was, yeah, it was really quite beautiful. But I do feel like I probably had a lot of times when maybe I was going places in my head and I just didn't know it.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden you're like, wait, where am I again?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. That felt like a very out of body experience for me.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of experiences since I was a kid, and there's one thing that used to happen to me that I didn't recognize was actually me pulling up out of my body, not completely leaving my body, but pulling up out of my body until recently. Um, I used to have this sensation as a kid. I'd be like walking down the hallway, and all of a sudden I would look down and I could see like my feet a different distance away from my eyeballs than what I'm used to.
Mm.
So, like, as a 5'6.5" tall woman, I would look down and I know where my feet are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times that I will look down and it looks like my feet are 20 feet below me. Like I
Wow.
can still feel that I'm in my body, but it's like I'm huge and I'm looking down.
That's
And
crazy.
so,
So you feel like a giant?
yes, which I've been told when I've actually started asking about it because I thought that was a normal thing. Like I didn't know that other people didn't feel that. I'm like, "Do you ever feel really giant?" And people are like, "Well, yeah, because I gained 10 pounds." And I'm like, "That's not what I mean. Like that's not what I mean." But so I started asking a little bit more recently because I think I probably said it to my fiance and he was like, "What?" Like, not like in a judgy way. He was just like, "I don't understand. Like, tell me more." It could have been somebody else that I was talking to, but I usually tell him things like that. And when I checked in, my guides were saying that sometimes I just don't want to stay in my body. Like I just want to be out there. So I will start to pull myself out of my body, but I realize that I can't leave my body yet. So it's like I'm half in, half out. So I'm having this
Mm.
experience where I'm like seeing things from this perspective of being way up here, but I'm still like tethered fully into my body and not fully releasing yet.
Okay.
Um, so I have that experience quite often. I've also had experiences in meditation and in sleep state where I will actually witness myself. Like one time in particular, I was in a meditation at my old office, and we were all meditating in the giant like atrium area outside of my office. And I was laying on the floor and one of the gals was leading the meditation. And all of a sudden, I recognized that I was above my body, looking down at everybody who was in the room, and I could see physical changes happening to my body as I was starting to release things. This is going to sound a little bit morbid, but like, I witnessed energetically like my body separating open and like peeling off my skin and peeling off like everything about my physical self, peeling it all off and sloughing it off. And I just sat above watching the whole thing, which is really freaking creepy
Wow.
when you see that. But so I've had a lot of those experiences in meditation. We've talked in the past about going to the Monroe Institute um, in Virginia. And one of the things that the Monroe Institute does is they study out of body experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're in your check unit, so like your bed is in this little semi-enclosed area, and when you're going through your activities and your meditations, I've had a lot of out of body experiences there where I can see myself leave my body and then go up into the cosmos, go into different levels of consciousness and interact with people in other areas. And one of the things that they kind of talk to you about doing is connecting with the other people who are in those classes.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in your check unit, you set an intention to go and meet with other people in these other levels of consciousness. So there would be other people who would have an out of body experience, and you guys would just go meet in the park somewhere. Like,
Wow.
so
Is
there
that
are some.
you've talked about shamanic journeying a little
Mhm.
bit maybe on here? I know we've talked about it anyway.
Yeah.
Is that like what you're describing? So astral projection is like a
Yes.
way to describe shamanic journeying
Yep.
also? Does that
Yep.
make sense? Okay.
Exactly.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So you're taking your soul, you're taking your energetic self, and you are going into other places um, to either do healing work, to do helping work, for a little bit of a break from the human experience. Um, there are some people who I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're sleeping and all of a sudden you like jolt awake, like you just
Mm-hmm.
back into your body. And I say back into your body because a lot of the time that's a sign that you've been astral projecting
Mm.
and you dropped too quickly back into your human vessel.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that that's what's happening. So if you're having like a flying dream or something, and then just all of a sudden you feel like you're falling and you just jerk awake,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually because your body started to wake up more quickly than you could get back into your body. So
It's
your
like a
soul
race.
had to, yeah, so your soul had to jump back in really, really quickly.
Okay.
And so it's like you didn't have a an easy landing. It's like coming in
That's
quick.
interesting. You
Yeah.
know, I very rarely remember my dreams. I know I've had that happen to me, but I very, very rarely remember any of my dreams. Like I
Yeah.
might remember them briefly when I wake up, but as soon as I'm like up, it's gone.
Yeah.
Um, which kind of stinks sometimes because there's certainly been times that I woke up from a dream and I'm like, man, I want to remember that or go back to that dream. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
but what do I want to go back to again? I
Yeah.
don't know. Anyway, oh shoot, this brought up a couple things in my head that of course now I'm kind of spacing on, but it is kind of interesting because as you're describing this, I feel like there's probably a good chance that my husband and daughter do this unintentionally all the time.
Mhm.
And really enjoy not being present with
Yep.
the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I it sounds interesting and appealing to me, and I certainly wouldn't mind doing that, but I am a like super grounded person, almost too much so sometimes, where I can get like imbalanced in a way of being very like stuck and unmoving type of
Yeah.
grounded. Which I know that about myself, it's fine. But as you're describing this, I remember the thing that my daughter said ages ago, because both of them are these hilarious, creative little like basket cases sometimes. And when she was really young, she's like, Mom, Dad and I are like balloons, and you're like the person holding our strings, so we don't float away. And as you're describing all this, I'm like, that is funny because that's what I'm picturing. I'm picturing like people's souls just kind of like bobbling up there
Yeah.
while their
Yeah.
bodies like don't go too far.
Yeah. That's exactly what it's like.
That's really
And y-
fascinating.
you brought up not dreaming. And actually, a lot of people who are astral projecting or astral traveling at night, they don't remember their dreams. Um,
So that could be where I'm
because
doing all my stuff.
it certainly could be. So, a lot of people who are astral projecting, their soul is actually going out and doing the helping work that they can't do in person.
Mm,
And so, unless you're supposed to remember the work that you've been doing, a lot of the time you're not going to have dreams in
okay.
that state because your energetic body's not present with your body.
That would honestly make a lot of sense. No matter how hard
Yeah.
I try, I can't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't really care that much that I can't remember. Um, but that is kind of funny thinking of that little sneaky thing, like sneaking out at night, like, oh, let me go do all this stuff, and she's never gonna know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so sometimes I've had experiences where people have a sick relative who's on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world, and they're concerned that they're not going to be able to see them before they pass, or they're concerned that they're not there to assist them. And the information that comes in a lot of the time is that their soul is stepping out and doing that work for them because they can't make it there physically. So their soul is stepping out and going and assisting this other person or making amends or doing that
Mm.
energetic work so that you don't have to worry about it in the physical. Um, so there's a lot of healers and a lot of like energy work practitioners that do this work at night. They'll step out of their body energetically to go and assist all the people around the world who need assistance with energy work.
That's cool.
And it's part of the reason why some people wake up super, super tired because they don't give themselves space to actually rest. So sometimes their soul is working so hard while they're sleeping that they're not actually like resting their energetic body.
That totally sounds like me. Are you telling me the problems I have in the physical realm, I might be having in other
Well,
realms too?
girl, maybe.
Oh, that's fine. I mean, cool though. I'm as
Yeah.
far as the idea that we could all be doing really interesting things, and helping in ways that we might not even acknowledge or understand.
Yep.
Um, it kind of reminds me too when you were talking about people being on the other side of the country, you can't get to them. I know in conversation that we've had before where my husband's grandmother was in another state and we couldn't get to her, and she was nearing the end. And when I think of her coming to you, well, she was still alive, because I remember I called them like, is there any way we can get her this message? And you're like, absolutely. But it never
Hmm.
occurred to me that that's astral projection, that
Hmm.
they haven't passed, but they're able to still like move around and do the things that they need to do outside of their body.
Yeah.
That's amazing, because you got really clear messages very quickly from her. So she clearly was doing
Hmm.
work already to get herself prepared for all of this.
Oh, yeah. She was ready to give messages. She was right
Mm-hmm.
there.
And it was beautiful. I mean, that was a hugely healing experience for both my husband and I, because you don't ever want somebody that you love to feel alone in the end, and
Yeah.
it was unfortunately a situation where it was during some of the height of the pandemic. A lot of nursing homes and stuff were locked down, so even if we had traveled to her, we wouldn't have been able to see her
Yeah.
So that seemed like the best solution is, can we get her a message somehow, even though she's
Yeah.
not like physically conscious? And
Yeah.
that was really, it was really interesting. The messages, the very specific messages we got that also made it really clear that she knew exactly what was happening in the room with my husband and I.
Hmm.
Because when she spoke to you, she repeated exact words of what I had been talking to my husband about. And I was like, whoa, that is really cool that,
Yeah.
that you can do that. But it's beautiful because that was such a important thing for all of us, like to make sure that we knew that she wasn't alone and that she did know what was happening and that she was prepared and she knew that this was all with love. I mean, the lovely woman was 99 years old and very much vocal at that point about, like, yeah, I can be done now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we didn't necessarily think she was scared. We just didn't want her to be alone. And that was really
Yeah.
cool. Wow.
Yeah.
As much as I didn't think I knew anything about astral projection, apparently I've experienced different pieces of it in my life. This is super
Hmm.
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so as you were talking about the grandma situation, I was thinking about one of my clients who passed away last year. She was one of my younger clients and had a lot of medical stuff going on, but she was very, very connected to the spirit realm. She was nonverbal. She had a lot of things where she communicated with people through action and through facial expression and through sound, but she didn't have a lot of communication directly with people like through words.
Mm,
And so she communicated a lot with energy, and she did a ton of astral projection.
mm,
And it was interesting. There were many times in her life where everybody thought that she was going to cross over. And in those moments, it was interesting because spirit would step forward. Sometimes Jesus would step in and say, hey, I'm walking with her. Just so you know, she has one foot here and one foot there. She's projecting herself to the other side, just testing the waters, seeing if she wants to be there.
mm,
And like, so she would go back and forth in this astral projection state quite a bit, like just cross over into the other realms and just walk around there. And there would be times where she wouldn't really be interacting in the way that she typically would in her physical body. And of course, everybody was concerned that she was going to cross. And it would come in very clearly. No, she's just testing out the other side.
mm,
She's just checking in to see if she wants to go there or not. Like, totally her choice if she's going to cross over. But it was an interesting lesson for me to see that at a soul level, when we're preparing to cross over, when we're preparing for death of the physical body, we're in a place where we have the choice to step out, to fully pull our soul out of the body and go interact there, prepare ourselves for that process. And that's what a lot of people do. They'll
mm,
actually step over, they'll start talking to people. Like, you hear about the tunnel of light and people talking to other people who've crossed over, things like that. And then they come back into their body.
mm,
Well, they're coming back into their body because they've astral projected to this other state. They've had an out of body experience. They've done this beautiful thing where they've had this experience, but then they came back. They were still tethered to their human body and they came back in. But they still had that beautiful experience, that out of body experience. So they have that knowing of both sides. And a lot of people, when they're getting ready to cross over, especially if they've done their work, if they're ready, or not necessarily ready in this moment, but they're like, meh, I've lived a good life, like
mm.
99, 101.
Right.
I had a lot of those clients. They're like, if I die tomorrow, it's fine. I've been here, done that. It's fine. Like, if I'm still here for another 10 years, good, but I don't need to be.
Mm,
And so they've done that work where they're prepared for that moment to happen. They do a lot of crossing back and forth, kind of testing the waters. Hey, is it time yet? Hey, like, what's it like on the other side right now? And then they'll come back into their body and be like, I think I want to stay here for a little bit longer. So that's another part of the out of body experience and the astral projection experience is
hmm.
preparing yourself to move on.
I keep thinking of like a metaphysical Zillow where you're just like going over there and checking out houses.
Which
Like,
school am I going to go to on the other side?
yes. What's it like over there? Is it a good neighborhood? We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool that there's so much more going on and so much more prepared that people are for passing than we often think they are. Not that I know we've talked before too that there can't be some confusion and stuff sometimes, but it sounds like a lot of people
Mhm.
do have an idea of what's happening, and maybe it's a soul contract, whatever the case may be, have an idea of what's happening and
Yeah.
are not only preparing on the other side, but able to connect with people in the physical world still
Yeah.
to make sure that they're okay, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the creepy movie. Um, just because I feel like I didn't finish that whole thing up about moving too far out of the body and other things
Mm,
stepping in to the
yeah.
human vessel, because I feel like that could be a point where people are like, what? How do I stop that from happening? You didn't answer that question.
Tune in
So
next week. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
you have to watch all of our things and enter all of the right codes and jump through all of the right hoops. No, so one of the things that's really important to know is that when you are doing any type of astral projection work, I tell people to set intentions before you do meditation or before you do astral projection or before you go to sleep, that you can find your way back. Like if you know you're
Mm,
somebody who's doing astral projection, set some intentions, set some boundaries and some parameters for yourself. Hey, if you get into a place and you're starting to feel like you're a little bit further out than you should be, take a few steps back. Like,
mm-hmm.
please don't get lost. Um, and just setting those intentions before you go to sleep helps so that you don't get too far out of body um, and lose your way. The other piece of that is looking at healthful choices, looking at how you're treating your human vessel, how you are caring for yourself. Because if you're not caring for your human vessel, like I said, sometimes when there's addiction involved or there's some type of physical abuse or some type of trauma that's happening to your body,
Mm-hmm.
it will push the soul further and further out of the body because you're uh, trying to navigate the trauma. And so,
Sure, like dissociating.
yes, yes. So your soul will get pushed further and further out of your body the more and more trauma there is,
Mm-hmm.
because you're less and less of the person, and there's no space for your soul in that human vessel anymore. Like the kindness, the goodness, all of those things that your soul is bringing into your body are no longer tolerated in that environment anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get pushed further and further out. So when that happens, or when you are in that lost space because you've allowed yourself to travel too far just because you're exploring, it does leave an empty space. It leaves your human vessel open. And just like we've talked about, when you clear a space, when you go around and you smudge a space, you have to fill that space back in with something.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's open to get filled. So when you clear a space and it's this beautiful spot that is just like empty, just completely calm, if you don't bring the joy back in and you don't put that positive energy back in, whatever else wants to come in is going to come in because they want a space to be. So
Yeah.
if you have low vibrational beings who had an experience, especially if you're dealing with addiction and that's why your soul has stepped out,
Mm-hmm.
um, low vibrational beings who had that same experience, they can tolerate that environment in the physical body.
Mm-hmm.
So they will be drawn to that open space and they're like, sweet, I can go back to my addiction. I can go back to the drinking. I can go back to the drugs. I can go back to all of these things and I can live again. And so that soul will step into that human body and take over that space,
Okay.
which I've heard of experiences and I've seen um, situations where that happens and the attitude of that person is completely different
Mm-hmm.
than it was because it's not them, it's a different person who is living their life. And so creating space, creating environments that your soul will want to stay in
Mm-hmm.
is really important as well. So if you know that you're somebody who has not been caring for yourself, or you know that you've been having experiences, if you've dealt with addiction in the past and you're having experiences where you don't feel like the same person, or people have told you that you don't seem like the same person, it could be something that's happening. And taking steps to start caring for your physical body again and making a safe environment for your soul to stay put. Um,
Okay.
I
That's
mean,
interesting.
easier said than done in some cases, but chances are, if you're listening to this and you're hearing this and that's going, oh, that sounds right,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably in a space that you're ready to start moving forward and you're ready to start shifting that and
Sure.
caring for yourself because your soul is saying, hey, I would like to come back and stay in this body. Yeah, yeah. So
Hmm.
so just a couple of things. Just caring for yourself and setting boundaries is
Sure.
important no
It
matter
always
what energetic work you're doing.
goes back to intention, always.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's really good that you brought that up too, because I didn't really think about that, but the curiosity that some of the younger people have about a lot of this stuff, it is a good reminder that you should still go into it with the right intention, the right headspace, and also don't dabble in things that you don't either don't understand or you're trying to use for purposes that aren't the greatest, because you're
Yes.
always going to want to go into something like this with good intentions, good mindset, and the right purposes, so you don't put yourself in a position where something happens that you are not prepared for.
Yes. Yes. That I don't know why that brought up, but it brought up astral projection and remote viewing.
Mm,
So I used to, when I was in a psychic development class, there were a couple people in the class that were talking about, oh, we should have like a remote viewing party and we should astral project ourselves into this space and all have these meetings together. And what the intention of the group was is that they would astral project themselves. So they would take their soul and physically go and meet in that place. Remote viewing is just energetically viewing a space. You're not actually taking your soul and putting it there, where
mm-hmm,
astral projection is actually projecting yourself into that place. And so they would astral project themselves into that place. And then while they were in that place, they would gather information about what they were seeing. And then they would compare notes later to see if they were all actually astral projecting themselves to the same space.
mm-hmm,
And somebody in the class said, oh, this could be real creepy. Like if somebody
mm,
decides that they're going to astral project themselves into my bedroom at night or astral project themselves wherever. And unfortunately, I've seen this with people in the metaphysical realm and the woo-woo realm that did not have the best intentions.
mm.
They would go and they would project themselves somewhere at night and like do creepy things like watch people sleep and like just be real creepy. Um
Oh, that's a
and
real life horror movie.
yes, yes. But there are things like that too, where it's like people are starting to dabble in this, and you can use it for purposes that are not of the light. And when you start doing things like that, it creates an energy around you. It creates a lack of boundaries around you as
Hmm.
well that makes it easier for your astral body to get stuck somewhere. That's not good for you. It allows you to go into these realms that are darker realms, where you're interacting with energies that aren't necessarily of the light or good for you
Mm-hmm.
in a physical way or in a spiritual way.
Hmm.
So talking about kids like dabbling in that, and it's kind of like with Ouija boards, where sometimes you do things because you think it's going to be fun, and you're like, oh, I can do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get there, you realize, oh, that does not feel great,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I shouldn't do that. So if you do have children who are astral projecting or talking about astral projection, maybe just opening the conversation about what's appropriate behavior and what's appropriate
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. Um, and even having those conversations with yourself as well. Like, I mean, it might be a different story to astral project yourself into your spouse's room, like at night, or in your bedroom at night when you're not home or whatever. That's a different story than if you're somebody else who's astral projecting yourself somewhere that you
Right.
don't necessarily belong.
Well,
Um,
and that's the boundaries that we should have with all of this. This is all stuff that we should respect. You know, we've talked about this before too, that when you do energy work, Reiki, when you're channeling any of that, you always want to be considerate and get
yeah,
permission, right?
yep,
Just like you would do in the physical world. You knock on someone's door before you go in, usually out of respect.
yes,
Um, that we should just remember to still be as good as we can about all of this stuff. It's a good reminder, but also
yeah,
you don't want the negative consequences of calling in a lot of the uncomfortable, maybe not
mhm,
best intention things into your life. I mean, if you're
yep,
living with good intention, you're probably going to be a lot more protected from that than if you are
yep,
dabbling in something like you said that you know doesn't feel very good.
yep.
Um
So,
so
moral of the story, don't be an asshat.
yeah. I mean, all of this stuff, it's like anything. Anything can be light or dark. Anything could be used for
Yeah,
any purpose. There's a balance.
yeah,
And anything in the physical world. Too
yep,
much of a good thing is, is never great. You have to be
yeah,
balanced about all of it. I get that.
yeah.
Um, well, this has been a really fascinating story, and I think it would be kind of fun. You brought up remote viewing and a little bit of the differences. Might be fun to talk a little bit more about that sometime too, because we've touched on that a few times. But it is
Mhm.
interesting to see the distinction between astral projection and remote viewing. So
Mhm.
maybe we'll have to
Yeah,
talk about that one too.
cool. I think that can be done. That can definitely be done.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all the information. And now I feel like I know way more than I thought I knew. Hopefully, you
Of
guys do
course.
too.
Cool.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for the conversation. We'll talk to you all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks everybody for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and check the show description for the links to the show. We would love to hear your thoughts below on this episode, as well as anything that you'd like us to talk about on future episodes. Remember, everybody, you are unique just the way you are, and that is why they call us Woo.
Mm-hmm.